In our headlines on this Tuesday, November 5th, here in South Korea, America is electing its 47th president today, and according to the U.S. Census Bureau, some 160 million people are heading to polling stations to cast their vote as the international community awaits the result that will have implications beyond America's borders. And North Korea fires a series of short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea earlier this morning, triggering stern condemnation from South Korea, whose military has described the latest display of defiance as despicable. Meanwhile, the Yoon administration reaffirms commitment to its 4+1 reform framework for education, health, labor, pension and low birth rate as it marks the end of the first half of its term in office. Today, that is November 5th, is Election Day in the U.S., where Americans are voting for their 47th president. Our Choi Soo-hyung starts us off.
Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris and the Republican Party's Donald Trump are making their final push to win the White House. Both candidates held intense rallies in Pennsylvania, one of the battleground states, on November 4th, the day before the presidential election. Vice President Harris campaigned at 5 locations in Pennsylvania, including Scranton and Allentown, and ended her campaign rally in Philadelphia on Monday night.
The race ain't over yet, and we must finish strong, and this could be one of the closest races in history. Every single vote matters.
Former President Trump also held a rally in Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania and moved to Grand Rapids, Michigan, wrapping up his campaign rally.
With your vote tomorrow, we can fix every single problem our country faces and lead America into the world.
Pennsylvania, which has 19 Electoral College votes, the highest among the 7 swing states in this election, which also include Nevada and Wisconsin, is seen as the most decisive battleground. According to a New York Times poll on November 3rd, both candidates were tied at 48% support, showing an extremely close race up to the last minute. The race for vice presidential candidates were also in full swing. Democratic candidate Tim Walz visited Stevens Point, Wisconsin, a swing state, to rally support for Harris. Starting in La Crosse, Wisconsin, Walz ended his campaigning in Detroit, Michigan. Republican candidate J.D. Vance also held last-minute rallies across battleground states, including Wisconsin, Michigan, and Georgia. Vance finished his campaign with a rally in Newtown, Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, security has been tightened ahead of the election. To prevent any potential violence, a 2.5-meter iron fence has been placed in front of the White House, and about 100,000 polling places nationwide are under 24-hour surveillance by the FBI. In at least 17 states, including Oregon, Washington, and Nevada, almost 600 National Guard troops are on standby. In this U.S. election, approximately 160 million voters are expected to participate. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
Now, while we await the result of that race in this next report, we share with you some intriguing information about the election in the U.S. The presidential election there is not based on the popular vote. It's based on a system called the Electoral College. Our Park Gonu explains.
The U.S. presidential race is coming to an end. Beginning midnight on November 5th in Dixville Notch, a small village in New Hampshire, the in-person presidential vote will come to a close 25 hours later in Alaska. The U.S. uses the electoral vote instead of a popular vote system, so Tuesday's election is to select the Electoral College, which has a total of 538 votes, made up of 100 senators, 435 congressmen, and 3 electors from Washington, D.C. Democratic candidate Kamala Harris and Republican candidate Donald Trump will need at least 270 votes, also called the magic number, to ensure victory. This means that a candidate with more of the popular vote can still be defeated if they receive fewer Electoral College votes. In 2016, Hillary Clinton lost the election to Trump, although she won around 2.9 million more votes. If Harris and Trump are tied on 269 votes, their fate will be decided by the House of Representatives in early January. The number of electoral college votes differs by state based on the size of its congressional delegation, with states with bigger populations getting more electoral votes. For example, California, which has the largest population, has a total of 54 electoral votes, because California has 2 senators and 52 congressmen, while Wyoming, with the smallest population, has just 3, because it has 2 senators and 1 congressman. Most of the states follow the winner-takes-it-all rule, where the candidate who earns more votes within a state takes the whole electoral college. But Maine and Nebraska split their electoral votes, giving 2 to the state popular vote winner, and 1 vote for the winner in each of the state's congressional districts. After the electoral college is elected, they'll participate in a ceremonial vote on December 17th, while the next U.S. president will be inaugurated on January 20th next year. With the poll results for the past several weeks showing a tight race, particularly in the 7 swing states, including Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, it remains too close to call. And with the number of variables that could slow the process, including delays in counting mail-in votes as each state verifies tickets at different dates, and a possible recount in the case of a narrow victory, it could be as long as 2 weeks before we see a winner. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
And as we've said before, the result of the U.S. presidential race will have implications that go beyond its borders. That being said, our foreign affairs correspondent Peunji takes a look at the prospects of partnership between Seoul and Washington, as well as their efforts to ease tensions on the Korean peninsula under a new U.S. leadership.
The 2 candidates, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, have starkly differing views on how to share the cost for American troops stationed in Korea. In an op-ed to South Korean local media, Harris said the alliance between Seoul and Washington has been a linchpin of security and prosperity, while noting that South Korea is already paying sizable contributions to have American troops in the country. Last month, the 2 countries reached a deal on this issue after going through 5 months of negotiation. Whereas Harris will likely stick to this agreement, Trump has hinted at an attempt to renegotiate, saying Washington cannot be taken advantage of any longer in military and trade. He's been insisting that Seoul should be paying $10 billion a year, describing South Korea as a money machine. Many experts say that South Korea needs to be prepared for renegotiation should Trump take office again.
So, I think that we could definitely see an attempt to renegotiate the special measures agreement. That could cause alliance friction. I think that we could see a Trump administration attempt to try to repurpose the USFK, so the U.S. Forces Korea, to be postured more flexibly to deal with regional contingencies. And by that, one mostly understands a potential problem.
The 2 candidates also plan to take notably different approaches on how to deal with North Korea. Experts suggest that if Harris wins, we will see the new administration focus on strengthening relations with allies and partners to address nuclear threats from North Korea.
For Harris, denuclearization of North Korea remains the ultimate goal, but what's more important is working with allies to deter the North, so she will continue to focus on strengthening deterrence against North Korea's nuclear program by reassessing and enhancing cooperation with allied nations.
But a second Trump presidency could pose a significant risk for South Korea.
Trump will likely try to manage the North Korean nuclear crisis through a top-down diplomacy with Kim Jong-un. Going further, there is a possibility that he may recognize North Korea as a nuclear-armed state and partially or fully lift sanctions, initiating a nuclear arms reduction negotiation. This could potentially become a significant risk factor for South Korea.
However, both the Democratic and Republican parties have removed the term CVID, or Complete Verifiable Irreversible Denuclearization, in their new policy platforms. While it is too early to say that this fully reflects the new administration's policies, it raises speculation that the U.S. government may be shifting its priorities away from North Korea. The South Korean government says it's ready to respond appropriately, regardless of the outcome of the election. Peunji, Arirang News.
North Korea test-fired a round of short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea earlier on this Tuesday morning. Our correspondent Kim Jong-sil has details.
The South Korean military has condemned North Korea's recent provocations, labeling them as despicable and warning that such actions will only isolate the regime further, effectively turning it into a, quote, harsh prison. On Tuesday morning, North Korea fired several short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea, launched from the Sariwon area in Hwanghae-bukdo province at around 7:30 a.m. The missiles traveled approximately 400 kilometers in what was North Korea's second missile test in just 5 days, following the launch of the new Hwasong-19 intercontinental ballistic missile on Thursday.
These missile launches are a blatant disregard for UN Security Council resolutions and pose a significant threat, escalating tensions on the Korean peninsula. We will once again warn that North Korea will bear full responsibility for the consequences of their actions.
Tuesday's missile launch followed joint air drills by South Korea, the US, and Japan over the weekend. In response, Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, warned that these drills pose a serious threat to North Korea and highlight the need for the regime to enhance its defense capabilities.
These launches are a direct response to recent joint air drills by South Korea, the US and Japan, while also signaling North Korea's presence ahead of the US presidential election.
Professor Kim Jae-chun of Seogang University adds that these provocations may also be intended to influence the election.
This is to remind the U.S. of the fact that they are still a power to be reckoned with, and maybe to help Donald Trump a little bit in this tight race to have a nuclear arms reduction talk with Donald Trump if Donald Trump goes back to the White House.
He added that Pyongyang may also want to show its military readiness despite recently sending troops to Russia. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
And speaking of North Korean soldiers, their first armed confrontation against Ukrainian troops has reportedly taken place in the Kursk region. Our Lee Sing-jae has the latest.
Ukrainian authorities said Monday that the first North Korean troops deployed to Russia have already been attacked by its military in Kursk. According to Ukrainian media outlet RBC Ukraine, the first clash with North Korean troops has taken place, but details of damage suffered by the North Koreans were not disclosed. The reports come as Kyiv said last week that North Korean troops have not yet participated in the war, but would be joining the fight soon. Meanwhile, according to Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky on Monday, 11,000 North Korean troops are already stationed in Kursk. According to Reuters, Zelensky made this statement during a speech where he noted that he received a report on the North Korean troop movement from his intelligence team. The latest figure by Zelensky is greater than Kyiv's previous estimate. The Defense Intelligence of Ukraine announced on Saturday that some 7,000 North Korean troops were deployed on the Ukrainian border as of the end of last month. Zelensky said despite an increase in the number of North Korean soldiers, the response from its allies has not increased, expressing regret that Western allies are not responding more actively. Washington, on the other hand, says as many as 10,000 North Korean troops are on Russia's western front line. According to U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller on Monday, the deployed troops could engage in combat in the coming days, but he could not confirm whether or not the North Korean soldiers are already in combat. The Pentagon said between 11 to 12,000 North Korean troops could be deployed to Russia, including around 10,000 already in Kursk. It added that the total number of North Korean personnel, including factory workers, to assist Moscow in its war could go up slightly. Lee Sing-jae, Arirang News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin met with North Korean top diplomat Choi Son-hee in Moscow. Now, this is according to Russian state media. Putin welcomed Choi at the Kremlin on Monday, during which she relayed North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's well wishes. Choi has been in Russia for about a week, having arrived in the port of Vladivostok last Tuesday on a second trip to the country in 6 weeks. Back on the local front, a public presidential address and a press conference will be held this coming Thursday morning to share the administration's policy gains as well as a host of allegations by the opposition party. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
President Yoon Suk-yeol will deliver a public address and press conference at 10 a.m. this Thursday as he marks the midpoint of his presidency this week. A senior presidential official said Monday that the South Korean leader will explain what he's achieved so far and the direction of his policies in the remainder of his term. This will be Yoon's first press conference in about 2.5 months since the end of August. The format will likely follow the same structure as his most recent press conference, with the president delivering a national address first, followed by a Q&A session with reporters. According to the senior aide, Yoon will address all questions regarding matters of public interest. This could well include recent allegations that he and First Lady Kim Gon-hee may have interfered in party politics in 2022. The opposition party last month leaked a recorded phone call between Yoon and Myung Tae-gyun, an obscure political consultant, during which they discussed the ruling party's candidate's election process ahead of a by-election. Initially, the presidential office was leaning towards holding the press conference around the end of the month, following Yoon's diplomatic engagements, but the leader reportedly took his aide's advice to make a public address before his overseas trip. It appears the date was moved up after Yoon's approval ratings dropped below 20% last week, and the opposition steps up its offensive against First Lady Kim, vowing to pass a bill mid-month to launch a special investigation against her. Throughout his term, Yoon has been targeted with various accusations surrounding his wife's alleged misconduct and influence over his administration and personnel. His office has expressed hope that the upcoming press conference will bring clarity through Yoon's comprehensive explanations to the public. As he marks the halfway point of his term, the president's tone and rhetoric on Thursday could mark an inflection point in the domestic political landscape. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, as mentioned, the Yoon administration is advancing into the second half of its 5-year term, and in light of this occasion, his top aides met with the presidential press poll to share the achievements thus far and the work ahead. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
Reaching the halfway mark of President Yoon Suk-yeol's term in 1 week, the top domestic policy aides for President Yoon took time on Tuesday to explain what had been done so far and what the nation can expect for the second half. The 4+1 reforms, labor, education, medical, and pension, plus a low birth rate, were the first things emphasized, as they have been and will continue to be top of the agenda for President Yoon.
Supporting our children to grow into creative talents from fair competitions and enabling them to work in the fields they aspire to, ensuring that all of our citizens can receive high-quality healthcare anytime, anywhere, and live without concerns about their retirement. This is the essence of the 4 major reforms.
The Chief of Staff for Policy said the key to all the reforms, however, was overcoming the current demographic crisis. The low birth rate has been an issue for the nation for a while, and there have been positive signs with the recent slight jump in the fertility rate and number of marriages. The goal is to reach a fertility rate of 1 by 2030.
We request the special attention and cooperation of the National Assembly for the swift passage of relevant laws, including the Government Organization Act, to enable the rapid establishment of the Population Strategy Planning Department, which will serve as a control tower in addressing the population crisis.
Second was the economy, while the economic indicators such as gross national income, which surpassed Japan for the first time this year, and inflation rate at 1.6% for September are low compared to other OECD members. Actual living for citizens has not been easy, especially for many small business owners. An official also said there will be more budget allocated for small business owners and their financial burdens from debt as part of the efforts. Other topics the top office covered were future resources, safe environment, and fostering regions outside the capital. The occasion is being used to show the administration's motivation to finish the term strong.
However, none of this can be achieved without the support of our citizens. Legislative tasks also require active cooperation from the National Assembly.
This briefing marked the beginning of a 3-part series of the top office's efforts to reach out to the public in light of its halfway mark. The second part will be on Wednesday, a briefing solely on diplomacy and national security. And the finale
of course, the president himself on Thursday. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, inflation in the month of October stayed within the 1% range on year, noting its slowest momentum in some 4 years. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin has more.
Consumer prices in South Korea showing signs of stabilizing, with inflation remaining in the 1% range for the second straight month in October. Data released by Statistics Korea on Tuesday showed that the country's consumer price index, a key gauge of inflation, rose 1.3% compared to the same month the previous year. The on-year rise is also the lowest seen since January 2021. The rise in consumer prices had been in the 2% range since April, before dropping to 1.6% in September. The slowing of inflation last month was mainly driven by the cost of petroleum products falling 10.9% on year, marking the sharpest drop in 15 months.
The drop in prices of petroleum and fruit products was greater, lowering the rise in consumer prices in October 2024 by 0.3 percentage points from the previous month to 1.3% on year.
Fruit prices fell more than 10% on year in October, with apple prices plunging 20%. But overall prices of agricultural, livestock, and fisheries products were up 1.2% on year. Vegetables in particular saw a sharp rise, jumping 15.6% compared to the same month the year before, the highest seen since October 2022. Key ingredients of kimchi, an important staple of Korean cuisine, remained high, with prices of Napa cabbages up 51.5% on year and radishes up 52.1%. To address the high prices, the first Vice Minister of Economy and Finance at a Vice Ministerial Economic meeting on Tuesday said that the government will carry out measures to stabilize vegetable prices.
The supply of Napa cabbages will go up 10% compared to the previous year to 24,000 tons. And starting from October 24, there were discounts of up to 40% on cabbages and radishes to alleviate the burden on consumers.
The Bank of Korea, which also held a meeting on Tuesday to evaluate prices, assessed that while prices are stabilizing, consumer price inflation may return to the 2% range towards the end of the year due to base effect from low oil prices at the end of last year, as well as a result of the U.S. election. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Korea's age-old practice of making fermented sauces known as jang in Korean is likely to be listed as an intangible cultural heritage by UNESCO. Now, jang is based on soybean and includes 3 key varieties, namely doenjang, 간장, and gochujang, which define the identity of Korean cuisine. According to UNESCO, its deliberative body made the related recommendation after assessing the belief, knowledge, and practice of making jang. Recommendations for inscriptions are rarely overturned. The final decision will be shared after a meeting in Paraguay in December. The song "아파트" by Roger from BLACKPINK and American pop star Bruno Mars has topped US Billboard global charts for the second week in a row after its release on October 18th. According to Billboard on social platform X, the song ranked first on both the Billboard Global 200 and the Billboard Global Chart, which excludes the US. The Billboard Global Charts rank the week's most popular songs based on online streaming and digital sales worldwide.
This morning was the coldest this fall in the central parts of the country. Although it is an unofficial figure, some places in central inland areas were at below zero, with temperature in Panmunjom near Paju, Gyeonggi-do province falling to minus 0.7 degrees Celsius. According to official records, Cheoran in Gangwon-do province fell to 1.9 degrees, and Gangwon-do Island in Incheon to 3.7 degrees. The East Coast will be cloudy with 5 to 20 millimeters of rain until night. In the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province, where temperatures are low, about 2 centimeters of snow has accumulated. Please be careful because there may be slippery roads. Tomorrow, Chuncheon will start off at 1 degree, Daejeon 3 degrees. Highs will move up to 11 degrees in Seoul, Gwangju and Daegu 14 degrees. This cold will gradually ease with temperatures recovering from the weekend. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Do stay with us for our daily panel session coming up next.